middle-aged white women deserve less. Stay tuned, and you'll find out why. I'm Sebastian Shug, one of the hosts of Mars on Life. Of course, you already knew that. With me, as always.
I am he, as you are me, and we are all together. This is Ryan Mancini reporting in.
Now, we have a bit of a special episode today. Most importantly, the special guest I have right next to me. But before I go into it, I just wanted to kind of set the grounds for what we're going to be talking about today because this is something completely different. I know a lot of our episodes in the past, in fact, all of them, have been more or less a edutainment. It's on an edutainment type basis. This one is going to be different in the instance of it's just going to be straight catharsis. As you can see, well, as you can probably tell by my tone of voice, it's not something that I'm particularly passionate about unless it's about me being angry. And I really hate to sound like a Paul Joseph Watson here, but society isn't exactly changing for the better in regards to our topic today. So I'll open the floor with our special guest today.
Hello? What am I supposed to say?
Well, we have our returning guest
Thank you.
joining with us again. Returning guest, please state your name for the folks at home.
Hi, I'm Heather Friedman.
And there's back. Yay!
He's back. So, it's I figure I would just open it up because you two, especially you, Mancini, in regards to the area that you live in, and Heather, more along the lines of people that you know, can sort of relate to this topic at hand when I say that a certain demographic of people need to be stopped. So I'll open the floor. I'll give my closing statements at the end, but it's a piece that I really want to hear your side on, or both of your sides on.
Very quickly, before we get on to the main topic, I just wanted to do a very quick little bit of house cleaning, housekeeping, whatever. There have been a few recent passings that I just want to acknowledge. A couple of them we probably should have mentioned last week. However, given our excitement regarding talking about Clerks, it didn't feel appropriate with the episode. At least to me, it did not. I think I can safely speak for both of us that these are passings that they affect people in a lot of different ways. Two of these affected me very much so. The first of which being Grant Imahara from Mythbusters. When I found out about his passing, it was actually through Adam Savage from Mythbusters, and it broke my heart. Grant was someone that made me so happy, and someone who brought so much intellect to the show in a way that it was even unparalleled with his co-hosts, I think.
Right.
This was a guy who worked on the Star Wars prequels with Adam Savage, did some of the amazing special effects for those movies. I know we bash the prequels all the time, but there's still some practical stuff that he and Adam worked on that are exceptional. He also built the gay robot skeleton on the Late Late Show with Craig Ferguson, Jeff Peterson, and it took me so much by surprise, and I can't begin to express how sad I was to see him pass. And then also, as I was watching Clerks last week, I was doing my absolute best to not break down when I heard the news of Joanna Cole, who was the author of the Magic School Bus books. Those were very informative for me as a kid. Yeah, I watched the show and I played the computer games, but the books were different. The books went into detail and almost like comic book detail in a way that no children's books ever do. Not to mention the class of students was even bigger than it was in the show, so you had characters that you were like, okay, I know who Ralphie is, but who the heck is this? But that hit harder just because Joanna Cole made such an impact on my childhood with those books. She taught me to take chances, make mistakes, and get messy. Last time I tried saying that out loud, once again I nearly broke down. And also, lastly, but not not to diminish his greatness and his importance, but Michael Brooks, who's a great left-wing podcaster and YouTuber, gone far, far, far too soon. Died from a sudden illness, and his passing, among leftists, his passing is it's hard. He was, like I said, he was a younger guy. He was in his 30s, and this is somebody who's gone from interviewing Brazil's former president, Lula Ignacio da Silva, to, joking around with the Chapo guys every now and then. So I just want to say to Grant, to Joanna, and Michael, we miss you, and we hope you all rest in power. And there's not really an easy transition onto the main topic of mutual catharsis.
I guess the argument du jour, and I say that very, very loosely, is the Karen archetype. And, it's a piece of... It's almost like a statement that is just so belligerently wrong in so many ways. Like, how could someone envelop these types of characteristics and more to the point get away with it and or justify it being okay in society? Again, I'll just open the floor here because I know that you two had much to talk about regarding such. I know you live in Santa Clarita, Ryan, and that is a literal hellscape outside of just being a desert.
It's a Karen capital, if you will.
Oh, you nailed it on the head. Oh, yeah. Well, I feel that it's just staggering how you could have a generation of people that received the best education, looked up to some of the most polarizing figures of, American 20th century politics, and yet this is now what they've retired to become. And it's just kind of alarming that this is kind of the de-evolution of people where, it went from how it was in the 60s to now it's a bunch of people that are willing to sell out to a con man like the dang Cheeto in the Oval Office, to basically being completely against the principles of the civil rights era, except this is now the modern take on the civil rights era. This is the 2020 equivalent. And then to boot, having the anti-science element, which is its own can of worms regarding COVID and masks. It's just kind of like you've just got a lot of rubes and a lot of people that they're so busy in their hobbit holes of learning about learning, like that's what you could call it, listening to whatever they hear on Fox News or whatever Q has to say to them. It just turns into this kind of drivel of hatred and misinterpreting left-wing politics, which I'm sure there's going to be a statistic saying most of these people have never taken a poli-sci course or let alone a science course. But it's just kind of alarming how we've kind of reached this point where people are acting like drooling, slobbing children when it's all about public health. I don't recall people acting this way when cigarettes were finally deemed bad for your health outside of the cigarette industry.
I think what really grinds my gears, if you will, is the fact that a lot of these Karens are moms. They're middle-aged white moms, and they're acting just like they teach their children not to act. Like, if my mom's just like a mild Karen on the Karen scale. She doesn't throw like temper tantrums, and I've never once heard her ask to speak to the manager. So she's not too bad. But some of these like Karens that pop off at people, I'm like, you're acting like a 2-year-old having a temper tantrum. Like, aren't you the same kind of mom that would spank their child in the middle of a grocery store if they started screaming like that? Like, that's just what's so wild to me. Like, if I at 5 years old didn't want to wear a face mask, my mom would have forced me to wear a face mask, and I would have liked it. And at the same time, these like 40-year-old women are out here like, no, you can't make me wear a face mask. It's my right. Like, okay. Do you like my Lola from Big Mouth impression? I was trying.
Have enough like girth in your voice, like
What? It's my right.
God, I fucking hate those types of
Yeah,
people.
but I guess
Like,
I'm just grateful I haven't encountered a Karen like that.
Well, the worst aspect is the almost the identity politics irony of it all, because that, number one, that's what the mask wearing and then the Karen reaction, that's what it's developed into, as this new identity politics and this new culture, which is kind of a part of the reason why why this is the perfect show to talk about this, is that this is now like the new public statement about wearing masks. Now, a year ago, I watched the Watchmen TV show on HBO. I had no idea that within a year we were going to basically wind up like Watchmen, where everyone must wear a mask for, the common good. Like, to me, it was part of the weird dystopian world that Watchmen is. And of course they would say, we'll have some vigilantes wear masks working with the cops, but then the cops, in order to protect their identities, have to wear face masks too. And now that we're kind of in that world, it's so jarring, and especially like just before we started recording, there was a Blue Cross Blue Shield commercial where they, typical, where they have all the black and white photos and they play California Dreamin' in the background. And, they're showing everyone wear a mask, saying, it's about health, not opinion. And it's about, like basically saying it's not a this, that, and the other. It's this specifically. Cap that off by saying that it's amazing how we've come to this point where wearing a mask is actually a divisive issue. And then meanwhile, you have people that are like, oh, well, it's a big Marxist plot by Gavin Newsom and he needs to be recalled. And it's kind of like, oh, come on. Like, get your head out of the hunt for Red October and actually understand what Marxism is. And then we can talk about whether or not what Gavin Newsom is doing is Marxist. Spoiler alert, it's not. It's just, once I start hearing those things, I'm like, okay, you're wrong. Second, did you take a poli-sci course? Oh, you didn't. Oh, well, so you shouldn't be saying words like Marxist or, the people that like to call themselves nationalists. And it's like, you do realize that has a very negative association with 1930s Europe, right? But I love my country. Oh, God. Oh, God.
Yeah, I saw this really great like comic strip online. You've probably seen it. I shared it on Facebook and it's been going around, that essentially is like, what's the difference between patriotism and nationalism? And it's essentially talking about how patriotism is wanting the best for your country, even if that means changing laws and changing ideas, because that's what's best for the country. Whereas nationalism is all about, we're great exactly the way we are. We don't need to change. It's everyone else's fault. And it was a really important point that I wanted to make, especially to the Karens that I have on Facebook, that the Black Lives Matter movement and all the protests are patriotic acts, as much as they want to say it's not. I saw this great quote by I think it's a Marine. I wish I could pull it up and find out his name, but he said, people like Colin Kaepernick, who kneeled during the national anthem, and people who are protesting, who are utilizing their voices, those are the people that we fight for their freedom for. We're fighting for their freedom so that they can use their voices to make the country a better place.
Mm-hmm.
not the people who are just sitting on their asses saying everything's fine and dandy, because
Yeah.
it's not.
I figure we might as well mention this too, that another reason why, Heather, we have you back on is that you've been like, to my eyes, you've been like one of the best people in making all of this information very clear regarding wearing masks, and also with everything that's going on with Black Lives Matter. You've been like the best, you know, I don't know what the best term would be, but kind of like the best person to make it clear to everyone, like, hey, just in case you didn't get it the first time around. And, you know, and of course we have to mention the Jason Alexander tweet that you shared, because that, and this of course like led me down this weird rabbit hole with Facebook, where I realized how it's amazing how photos carry more engagement than links do. I don't know. It was just something interesting, because I've noticed to this day I'm still getting people liking my sharing of your post than, you know, anything else that I've shared. Like, for example, my recent appearance on Janice's show, The Jump Off. Friend of the show, Janice, had me on to talk about Kanye 2020. Listeners, check out part 1. It's available. We'll make sure we have a link in the description for this episode. Part 2 should be coming out within the next couple of days.
Shameless.
It was it was so much fun. But back on to the main topic. Actually, I'm gonna try and find that George. And there I go saying George, because that's how I know Jason Alexander. I gotta try and find the.
I have it pulled up because they.
Oh, cool. Okay, I was gonna say, because I deleted the Facebook app on my phone, and I gotta say, guys,
Wait,
I
the
feel
Jason
20 pounds
Alexander
lighter.
one, or
Yeah, the one about the
the
it was
London.
about the London, Londoners in World War II.
Here I can quote it. It was Jason Alexander at @JasonAlexander on Twitter. In World War II, Londoners were asked to black out their homes at night so that enemy bombers wouldn't see the lights and know where to target. No Londoner said, "It's my right to have my lights on," because others would say, "Your light on endangers us. Substitute light for mask. Now argue." And it's a really great point about the responsibilities that come with freedom. I've been seeing a lot of things that are like a lot of the anti-maskers social media posts have been about how, sure, you have the right to not wear a mask, but businesses have the right to refuse to serve you. And with your freedom that you keep touting, you also have responsibilities that come with that. And so it's just really frustrating that people are really think like that. It's like, because you got to think about like the worst case scenario, and this is where like logic no longer applies to these people.
What are you talking about? Conservatives are all about logic.
Apparently not, because
and so are the Vulcans.
You're telling me PragerU was wrong?
Oh my goodness. But it's baffling to me that people aren't willing to think about the worst case scenario versus best case scenario. Are you okay? He just stepped on a cord. He's a broken boy now. But like, worst case scenario, the government tracks you with your mask, which I'd like to point out, if the government is tracking you with your mask, how are they doing it if you've made it yourself? Second of all, shouldn't masks be helping the facial recognition software on all of the cameras on city blocks? Because now half your face is covered, and now you can't be as easily recognized. Fight that one now, anti-maskers. I want to hear your rebuttal to that one. But it's just like, worst case scenario, oh no, they track you, but if it turns out that masks do help, which science has proven they do, you're saving a lot of people. Versus, if you're right, and oh no, you didn't wear a mask because you didn't want the government to track you, but now all these people are dead because you didn't wear a mask. It does, like, think about it. Just think about it. I used this argument when I was arguing with some Karens about democratic political views. I was like, what's the worst thing that's gonna happen? Like, oh no, we give people more rights? The horror. like, if you say that everyone has equal rights and you say you're correct, oh no, we've just made it even more equal? Or it turns out that you were wrong and now we are actually equal. So, like, I don't know.
It's almost like
worst and best case scenario. What are the ends of the spectrum that you're willing to risk?
It's almost like they only pay attention to a profit motive, because even if you say, you know, in regards to the protesters, who, by the way, they are wearing masks. That's the funny part, is how, quickly, conservative media was ready to say, oh, these protests are going to make COVID worse, and which is ironic because they weren't saying that when their people were out saying, I want to go back to Red Robin and get a haircut. Like, they weren't saying it then, but now they're saying it, and yet, outside of maybe a few exceptions, east of California, every protest that I have been to, everyone is wearing a mask. I know that when we talked with Crystal, Sean, and Mike about their experiences early on with the protests, not long after George Floyd was killed, they were like, yeah, we saw everyone wearing masks. And, that's so encouraging. And at the same time, you're kind of thinking, okay, to all the Karens and I have to borrow a term from Walter Jeffrey, the French Bulldog's owner, for all the Karens and Garens out there, it's kind of like, come on, people. The protesters know they're not going to pass it because they're wearing a mask. Granted, they're not always staying 6 feet apart, which is something that irks me a little bit as somebody that, lives with someone who, is at risk. You're just kind of scratching your head thinking, why is this an identity politics issue? Because then they'll turn it around on you and they'll say one of several things, one of which being they'll turn it around and they'll say, oh, well, I can't breathe. And you're like, okay, now you're being a sanctimonious piece of what. And then on top of that, they'll turn around and they'll say, oh, well, it's my body, it's my choice. And then you want to turn around and say, oh, so that means you're okay with, with abortion, right? Oh, you're not? Oh, well, you see, it's my body, my choice. And then, the last of it being, if all these people really believed in all lives matter, certainly you would think they'd all support Medicare for all.
Oh yeah, that was the big debate topic of the one post that ended up with, like, I think it was 2 or 3 Karens and me fighting back with, like, a bunch of my friends just liking my responses.
Well, explain a little bit about that, because I know that Sebastian's been teasing me with that, and I'm before I share my recent Karen stories, I'd love to hear what yours is, just so listeners can kind of get an idea on some of the craziness you and I have recently encountered.
So I had shared on Facebook just another one of those screenshots of a tweet. Not unlike the 10 other things I share every day. Nothing new that I haven't shared 100 times on my Facebook. And so the tweet is from Hari. I'm going to butcher this name. Hari Kondabolu. Username is just his name or their name. And the tweet was, if all lives matter, then why don't we have universal health care? And why are prisons privatized? And why are there still homeless people? Because all lives matter is only used to justify racism. And so I just shared it, figuring it was just going to be another typical post. And I'll keep names out, so we'll just name them Karen 1 and Karen 2. So Karen number 1 comments. I'll read it for you. OMG, I don't know how to answer all of this. You would really want to have universal health care? Crazy. And letting all these people out of prison? Please lock your doors and be safe. And so this was the first of, unfortunately, many essays written in the comments of Facebook.
You want to call them essays?
I will call them essays.
I call them a dissertation, honestly.
Because
thesis statement.
Because they address every point in their statement complete with university accepted level research backing up my claims. Okay, so I won't read the whole thing verbatim because wowee, is she a long one. But essentially, I pointed out, I was like, there are plenty of other wealthy nations with universal health care. Maybe take some of the massive military budget and help out citizens directly. And then I got a little sassy and I said the question was, why are prisons privatized, not why are there prisons? You should pay attention to what I say before you comment at me. And so I went on to talk about mass incarceration and how things that a lot of the things being mentioned in the defund the police movement about helping prevent crime in the first place would be a better allocation of some of that private money, and how prisons, these privatized prisons, are getting government money, but they don't use all of it and keep it for profit.
Right.
And so I kind of go on these tangents, and then I responded with research about foreign countries that have universal health care. I quoted the Sentencing Project, which is a really big project aimed at breaking down mass incarceration, the school to prison pipeline, privatized prisons, all of that kind of stuff. And then to round it out, I put, I noticed how you didn't say anything about homeless people. You didn't seem to have anything to say on that end of the tweet. So then I included a link on how Finland has virtually eradicated homelessness, which is like props to them, and how we could potentially model off of them. And so to go down a tangent for a second, I just thought this was really cool. Finland's approach to solving the homelessness problem is housing first, solving the situation second. Because nobody wants to be homeless. There's mental health issues that are happening. There's money issues happening. There's a lot of things going on there that are tied into the homelessness. So Finland said, we're going to give you a roof first so that you have that figured out, so you can now take care of the problems that led you there. And they've seen almost 100% success rate with this. They have almost nobody on the streets anymore. Which, granted, smaller country. But what I have to say to that is smaller country, fewer taxpayers. So let that fuel your Karen rage as you will. Because I think that's the most common Karen comment I get is, oh, we can't do that in America because we're too big of a country. We're too big to do that. And I'm like, yeah. But you know what? We also have a lot more people paying taxes. And we have a lot higher taxes than a lot of other countries. So come at me, Karen. I'm just telling you, we pay plenty of money in taxes. And no, we're not going to have to raise taxes. And money's not just going to appear out of thin air. We're going to take that money from things that aren't as important, like the massive U.S. defense budget. Which leads me to Karen number 2.
Oh boy.
This was all 1 point.
First let me share Karen number 1's response to my essay. Her response was, didn't mean to keep you up all night.
What? Yeah, so I'm guessing she probably attended university.
I don't know.
Okay. Well, if she did, hypothetically,
she's just been owned and she knows it.
University level, like 2 university speakers right here. People who've gone to university, and that's all she can come up with. That's her best response.
Well, in the long run, it doesn't matter.
If she did, it's even better.
And then and then my I don't know, what's like the anti-Karen? What's the like good white
Literally
lady?
anyone fucking else.
I don't know. We'll call her anti-Karen number 1. So she's like closer to that age bracket than she is to our age bracket, but she's like an elder millennial, if you will. She responds with, what a rude response, honestly. Bravo to you, Heather, for putting so much thought into your responses. It's unfortunate when people with opposite opinions don't recognize the respect that it shows. And Karen number 1, it's too bad that if someone has a different opinion that it's wrong. Oh, well. And I'm like, no. The only thing is, I gave you statistics, research, articles, projects that are happening, and you've given me nothing. You just went, well, darn, I don't have anything. And just started pouting in the corner. And then she blocked me on Facebook. And then Karen number 2. Karen number 2 grinded my gears more than Karen number 1. And I'm deciding whether or not I want to read this whole thing, just so that everyone can be as offended as I was.
Please.
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to read it. Okay. Karen number 2 says, Heather, then why do the majority of Canadians fly to Thailand or the U.S. for medical procedures? Because there are wait lists, and with socialized medicine, many procedures are not standardized. In the U.K., stage 4 and 5 cancers are not treated. Many homelessness, so she's moving on to the next topic, many homelessness are actually mentally ill. In 1963, Kennedy signed a bill making it illegal to lock them up. Many homeless are gamblers, alcoholics, drug addicts, bipolar, you name it. Kansas City has one of the finest homeless programs, and many homeless don't have wealthy parents to help them out. Well, no, duh. That's my response to that sentence. And then this was the part that really got me going. Without our military, sorry, hold on, let me give a background to this. I'm Jewish American. My last name is Friedman, in case you couldn't tell. Without our military, World War II would have been lost, and you would have been saluting the Nazi flag. Maybe your dad's family would have been wiped out, and the homeless, the ills, gay, brunettes, brown eyes. Hitler was building a world of Aryans, blonde, blue-eyed. And I'm sitting here kind of in utter shock, because keep in mind that these Karens that I have on Facebook are people that I've known since I was born.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we went to preschool together, we went to Mommy and Me together. I'm like friends with their kids, and that's why I have them. And so the fact that she would like pull something like my race or my culture to use against me, I was like, are you kidding? So this essay was even longer. And basically I was like, interesting. I'd like to see your statistics, because I have a really hard time believing that a majority, which would be 51% or more, of people from Canada are flying to other countries to get medical procedures. So I was like, I asked for these statistics. And then I had to remind her that I had posted about homelessness. And if you had read the homelessness article that I had shared, you would have seen that part of the successful program in Finland included mental health care, which solves drug addiction. Well, it doesn't solve, but it helps drug addiction, alcohol addiction, gambling addiction. Those are all mental health issues. They're not just choices, obviously.
Yep.
As well as bipolar disorder and all these terrible things that she thinks are so horrible. And then I will read my World War II response, just because I was so angry about it. Military budget in 2020. I'm not talking about the military budget in the 1940s. I'm discussing the military budget in 2020. I attached an image, including the article, that compares the U.S. defense budgets to the defense budgets of, let me look at the item, the defense budgets of China, India, Russia, Saudi Arabia, France, Germany, United Kingdom, Japan, South Korea, and Brazil, which are the next top 10 military budgets, defense budgets. So the highest ones that come after us. And our U.S. defense budget is more than those 10 countries combined, and most of those countries are allies.
Yep.
So I attached this, and I said the military budget was not always that high, considering we're not at war, and we're not officially. We can dig into that another time. We don't need that kind of budget. Also, something to note is that this budget is for defense spending. So if we allocate some of that money, it wouldn't affect veterans' benefits, housing programs, veterans' health care, things like that, because I do know her husband has served in the military. So the military has its place, and it's done a lot of things for people, but it needs reform, and there's no reason to have a defense budget that large. And so I went on to just talk about what it would look like if we took even a quarter of that military budget, which would be $183 billion. If we reallocated $183 billion, which still leaves $549 billion left for the rest of the defense budget to stay that way, which is still larger than China, who comes in second, and allocated it towards education, healthcare, mental health care, and housing assistance programs, that would solve the issues of high crime, which could solve a lot of the mass incarceration issues, the privatized prisons, and mental health care, which could help solve homelessness problems. So it's almost like that money could provide people with opportunities to create personal and therefore nationwide success by helping these people. And then I ended it with, lastly, it's uncalled for you to bring up my Jewish heritage and use it as a weapon for your arguments. I am more than aware of what Hitler did to my people, and because of that awareness, I use it to prevent history from repeating itself. I urge you to read about the logical fallacies in ad hominem articles. So following Karen number 2's post. So first of all, Karen number 2 never even responded to my essay, which salty, but it means it worked. I had to post another I made another post on Facebook. Let me see if I can find it. That's essentially about how to properly argue. I'm so
Heather, you were
mad.
giving every single in for these people when they're not even taking it.
I was going to say, I was like, I am more than willing to have a calm, logical discussion about these things. Because a lot of the issue that these Karens have with me is they think that, one, I've gone off to college and become this radical liberal, and my professor forced me to turn into a liberal. Oh, but
you're in liberal California too, you dirty Marxist.
Which, on a side note, I think is hilarious because my parents are mad that I'm this crazy radical liberal now. When I went to the same university both of them attended, and my grandmother. So I'd really like to know how that liberal arts education worked out for those three.
Even major in anything STEM related.
No, they majored in sociology. Sociology in a liberal arts school, and you somehow turned into a Karen. I don't understand.
How do you, I have just a genuine question here. How do you study one of the most rudimentary, societally driven majors and come out such a bitch?
So I had to re-educate all of these Karens that I know a lot of them did attend university, and they are educated. And so first of all, a lot of them think that I just came to these ideas because my professors told me and I was brainwashed, and you're right, professor. When
I can't think for myself.
When in reality, when you go to university, the reason, at least in my opinion, the reason that so many college students come out liberal is, one, you're taught how to think for yourself. And a lot of parents don't want to acknowledge that, because up until you go to college, when are you thinking for yourself, at least when it comes to politics? You're thinking about what your parents are feeding you. You're probably not sitting and watching your own choice of news channel. You're watching Fox News with your parents.
Mm-hmm.
You're listening to your dad tell your mom about what has been happening in the world, but you're getting it through that lens. So you go off to university, and now you have these professors giving you tools on how to think for yourself, how to make strong arguments, how to find your own research and read about these things. And additionally, you're introduced to an entire new demographic of people, especially at schools like the Cal State system, where there's a large diversity to the population.
Mm-hmm.
So I had friends who commuted from downtown LA 2 hours each way on the bus so that they could go to CSUN. And hearing about their experience and seeing what they're going through changed my way of thinking. Having my Black roommate tell me about the times that she's had microaggressions while on the university campus alone changed my opinions. And it's because I've been exposed to these new schools of thought and learned how to think for myself that I went from, Dad, Trump sounds great, to "Are you kidding?"
Mm.
And so back to the original topic of this discussion was I have to remind these Karens how to properly debate, like I learned how to do in my communication class and in my logic and critical thinking class and in my intro to English class and all of theater. You can't write a paper without having evidence, and you have to make sure your arguments are legit. So the two things that I made a point about was the logical fallacies that come with arguments, and a lot of time, like my personal favorite example of one of them, I can't I should remember what the name is, but it's the one where you like spiral it out of control, where you're like, gee, I don't really like the sandwich that they're serving in the cafeteria today. Oh, wow. So you just hate all sandwiches, don't you? You're a monster. Well, if you don't like those sandwiches, then you better go somewhere else. You're like, whoa. I'll just get a salad, bro. I just wasn't about that sandwich. So I had shared an article about the 15 logical fallacies that come with arguments. And the one that really is important is the ad hominem arguments.
Yeah.
Which, for those that don't know what that means, it's when you attack the speaker instead of the argument. So that was a prime example of the Karen bringing up the Nazis. I was like, now you're trying to get me emotionally riled up, and that's not okay. Or when people are like, or my personal favorite ad hominem argument, you're too young to know what you're talking about.
Okay, so
you haven't lived as much as I have.
Okay,
you're right. When I live as much as you have, you'll be dead. So we can't talk about this way.
So I was gonna, and part of what I have to ask is what is the golden age of you finally being able to know? And you can be politically incorrect when you say, when I do know, however long that will be, you will be in the ground. Okay? So I will never be able to prove to you that I am right, which is it's sort of the pushing back the envelope of I am never going to admit that your point is right. Yeah. Because when you're right, I'll be gone anyway.
I was going to say, because I'm like, that doesn't, like, you're just trying to discredit me, but it doesn't work.
Well, that's what I've been trying to do with a neighbor of mine for years now regarding Trump, which is, and I'll put it this way. I won't give his full name, but I will say his name is Bill, for the purposes of this show.
It's a boomer name.
And he's actually the same age as Trump. He is in his mid-70s.
That's a boomer.
And what's funny about this guy is that I went from being a very straight-laced, objective journalist with a broad understanding of history, which all of that is stuff that he likes. However, this is a guy who for 4 years has basically become a de facto cheerleader for Trump to the point of even defending Trump's lies. And now under COVID, watching him deliberate as to whether or not he's going to vote for Trump again is like watching Darth Vader decide, do I save my son or do I stick with my boss? At the end of Return of the Jedi. It's kind of like I'm now reaching the point where I've given him every single hardcore, politically savvy response to questions and to understand things. And, Heather, to your point, I ran into the same issue with this guy where, he comes he comes from a very scientific background. He had involvement in engineering and nuclear energy. Mm-hmm. But this is a guy who, and this may be due in part because of his age, thinks that things are easily answerable when there's an algorithm or so basically a block.
So he's like oversimplifying everything.
Yeah, like, the race issues in America, what should we do? I wish there was an algorithm for it. Meanwhile, I'm going to vote for Trump because I don't think he's racist. Like, that's how this guy thinks. And I'm now at the point where I've literally given up arguing with him, and I'm now I've now boiled it down to the fact that Trump was raised in a family where there was no love. Mm-hmm. And growing up as Nicolas Cage would say, as a Beatlemaniac, if you ask me, all you need is love.
Mhm.
And, at this point, that's my new argument when it comes to Trump people is Trump lacks empathy. He's sociopathic. He probably is suffering from multiple neurological disorders. And
Mhm.
to boot, and this is kind of like the creme de la creme of this guy's nonsense when it comes to everything. Because, he'll tell me, oh, well, Anthony Fauci's always wrong. And,
Oh,
maybe it's
yeah.
good that the CDC gives its information to Trump, even though we can't trust Trump. But we don't have an alternative to Trump, even though Trump is bad. And I'm like, and of course, I'm not a Joe Biden supporter, but then again, I'm basically feeding him, hey, man, Joe Biden becomes president. That's going to be 4 years of laughter. That's a whole different episode. But the creme de la creme was when he and I are talking, and I let him know about my mother, who, I mentioned earlier, she has a background in the health sciences. And he basically told me, I don't trust anybody on this street in regards to science except my wife. She's a straight up scientist. And so later on, I asked him, what did your wife major in school? And he said that she got a BS in marketing, magna cum laude at Syracuse University. And she was responsible for aerospace forecasting and data analysis at manufacturing companies. She loved statistics in college. Now, I have to ask, what the fuck does any of that have to do with the health sciences?
Mhm.
Because I followed that up with, I said back to him, or I replied to him, I followed up with my mom and her background. As I said before, she majored in microbiology, graduated magna cum laude from Cal Poly Pomona, and spent most of her post-college career working as a hematology supervisor at Century City Hospital from 1988 to 94. Her field was always in the health sciences, working in a lab, studying and testing various diseases and other conditions, along with overseeing laboratory operations and administering to patients, including AIDS patients. And then on top of that, I told him that when it comes to virology, this is something that's also been a part of her work and her study. She's an expert on this stuff. And then to boot, my mom started showing me all these pictures of her in the 80s working in a lab. And then she showed me all of her clinical laboratory scientist licenses from the state of California,
Mhm.
which, by the way, she continues to renew, even though for the last 25 years she hasn't been practicing, but she's still,
Keep
she's still
it.
getting the licenses because she keeps reapplying. And, it's like when your membership or your license expires and you got to get the new license.
Mhm.
And of course, after I tell him all that and also show him, I took a screenshot of some of the screenshot. These were physical photos, damn it. The 80s. I took a picture of some of my mom's photos, and it was only then that he got it. Because he was acting like, oh, well, I don't see your mom coming and telling me about how healthy I should be and wearing a mask. And I'm like, yeah, because she doesn't need to get outside and get sick from anybody. That's why she's not coming to you and
Yeah.
saying X, Y, or Z. And so it's kind of like it's reached this boiling point where, I ended up crossing this great article from Jacobin where it's supposed to be a book review of A Citizen's Guide to Beating Donald Trump by David Plouffe or Plouffe, and he was Barack Obama's first campaign manager.
Mhm.
And the headline of this article is "Liberals Still Think Fact-Checking Will Stop the Right. They're Wrong." And I, outside of my own preference for Jacobin, I've kind of realized that this is what we're dealing with now
It's
is
true.
facts and figures and history and statistics ultimately aren't going to mean that much. Now, with this neighbor of mine, I recently read, and I think I was talking with Sebastian in a previous episode about this. I recently finished reading this long tome about the AIDS epidemic.
Mhm.
And number one, it's probably the most heartbreaking book I've ever read. I can't tell you how hard it was to not cry after the end of each chapter, but you basically learn that Reagan handled AIDS in such a monumental way that it's Trumpian, because he didn't respond to the AIDS crisis until 8 months into his second term as president.
Yeah.
And by then, we were already close to 100,000 AIDS deaths in the United States alone.
Yeah.
Now, that stuff, this neighbor of mine will realize, like, wow, this is terrible. That I can't, it's heartbreaking that happened. I try to ignore all of his homophobia, which that's an episode in of itself. But, I've come to the realization that with some of these people, you brought up the point about patriotism earlier, Heather, and I don't even know if that matters to them anymore, because I recently had, and this is my other main Karen story, and I'll just mention it briefly, is that I, due to a local campaign that I have had involvement in, I decided to join a couple of Facebook community groups that are local to where I live. Now, of course, as Sebastian and I have talked about before, Santa Clarita is known for having a lot of conservatives. In other news, water wet. But, what happened was I joined this one particular group, and the amount of drivel that I saw from, pictures of Gavin Newsom looking like the Joker, saying we need to recall this SOB, to claims that Joe Biden's going to put the squad in his cabinet, which, hold my beer. That's funny. But the probably the worst offenders of it were, actually the first moment was when I decided to post a video of this British nurse who basically made it abundantly and medically clear that unless you have some absolutely dire lung condition, masks are not going to negatively impact your breathing. And, obviously he brings up the point in this video, and I'm blanking on the gentleman's name, but he basically points out that, nurses and doctors are wearing masks at least 10 hours a day. So, and you don't hear anything about doctors and hospitals keeling over due to a lack of oxygen. But he had a monitor with a clip attached to his finger where he basically said, this monitor basically tells you what my saturation of oxygen in my blood is like, as well as what my heart rate is. So he puts a mask on, and lo and behold, after several seconds, his heart rate is fine. The oxygen in his blood is virtually the same. And even by the end of the video, he was like, I can't believe I have to tell people this. Now, I shared it on this community page, and some of the religious nuts that I've come across immediately started reacting to it with the laugh reaction, the haha reaction, I should say. And at one point, I couldn't believe it. I had someone suggesting basically that masks are the sign of the devil. They're the mark of the devil. And they were using like some quote from Revelations to prove it. And then subsequently, they called me a liar, and they spelt liar L-I-R-E. And then they decided to analogize it with the face bindings that were used on African slaves.
Priceless.
Oh wait, so now we care about the slaves?
I know, right? It's like now Black Lives Matter because we can't wear masks because masks make us slaves. Look at Darth Vader.
Okay.
And
everyone here is trying to be George Orwell or fucking Aldous Huxley with the analogies in the chat.
Yeah.
And it's like, dude, have you even read a book?
Well, and then it gets even better, because I had one guy who was like, I'd love to know who this guy had the monitor connected to, because it definitely wasn't connected to him.
Mm-hmm.
And I immediately said to this guy, watch the video. He has a clip on his finger connected to the monitor. Like, you're not even trying now. Now you're just cutting corners, and you're not even bothering. You're just saying, oh, well, the monitor was magic, and that's why it's fake. And I'm like, oh, give me a break. Really? It's magic? And this is where I finally got banned from this Facebook page, because I was spamming every bit of hate, false information, and I mean, there was stuff on this page saying that the reason why we have the squad is because of 9/11 and all of this drivel that just it pissed me off, and it did wonders to my mental health. And then finally, some coward decides to share this 30-minute long video basically talking about how 9/11 was an inside job and that the media were behind it and Hollywood. And I replied to the guy and I basically said, as somebody who vividly remembers the events of that day when he was a child, and as somebody who openly wept walking through the halls of the 9/11 Museum in New York City, and I thought I had a screenshot of this, but I don't, so I'm going to do my best recalling it from memory. I basically told the guy that it just shows your soullessness and frivolity with the lives of 3,000 people, as well as my field of journalism. Mm-hmm. Learn to grow some shame. And naturally, I got the same response that a lot of weird conspiracy theory knob jobs like to tell me, which is you're entitled to your opinion.
Oh my God, I hate that one. I was like, no.
Now, the funny part was that before I got banned from that page, after reporting this scum-sucking bastard, one of the conservative admins liked my comment.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like, hey, right-wingers, some of you are arguably more anti-American than the socialists. Like,
yeah,
you guys think 9/11 was made up and that, George Bush was going to bring the rapture, but that didn't happen, so Donald Trump's bringing the rapture. And it's just like, we're not even arguing with sane people anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I find so mortifying is the fact that, we're living through a crisis that require, we're not in the bubonic plague where, we thought killing cats was the right idea and praying more. In fact, both of those exacerbated the Black Death. Killing cats meant more rats infesting everything and more people getting sick. And so, and on top of that, you have the Spanish flu. The thing that escalated the Spanish flu in 1918 was a world war that was going on. And to your point, Heather, about, the person who decided to bring up the Holocaust and Jews in Europe in the 1930s, the saddest thing with that too is that a lot of these right-wingers like to think that, well, that's the worst that humanity can ever get. Meanwhile, let's repeat it to other people. And it's heartbreaking and it's frustrating because, again, with this neighbor of mine, he doesn't like the term concentration camps involving anything else outside of what we typically think of, which is we think of what happened during World War II. We don't talk about what the British did to some of their colonial subjects. We don't think about what the United States did to its indigenous people. We don't even like to call them exactly the concentration camps that they forced the Japanese into during World War II. They called them internment camps.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, our country knows that the term concentration camp has a specific meaning.
Yeah.
If we call it an internment camp, a reservation, or a detention center, then we're fine. We're not breaking any rules. It's safe and everyone's fine. Yeah. Don't worry. Just gotta vote for me and it'll all be great. And then you read Mary Trump's book, and she flat out says, my uncle is putting people in concentration camps.
Yeah, it's going to be it's going to be interesting in the next 4 years or so, as either if Trump gets reelected, God forbid, and this escalates even further after this all goes down, what it's going to look like when we're on the other side of history on this. Yeah. And a lot of these people don't realize they're going to end up on the wrong side of history. And it's just like something that my parents are always like, well, I work, like my dad's whole thing, the whole reason he claims to be he's a Republican is because he doesn't want the government controlling his money. He doesn't want all his taxes taken up. And my argument to my dad was, I'm okay with my taxes being taken if that means it's going to help somebody.
Mm-hmm.
If you can have 10% of my paycheck if that means someone else doesn't have to sleep on the streets. You can have 10% of my paycheck if that means that little kids aren't thrown in cages at the border.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can have 10% of my paycheck if that means some little kid is getting treatment for cancer in the middle of Iowa or whatever. And it's like
Rather than some
that a
drone in
lot of
Yemen.
yeah, well, this thing is a lot of Republicans, if it doesn't affect them, they don't care. And
Yep.
I was like, just because it may never benefit me to get the little kids out of the cages at the border. And it may never benefit me if some little 2-year-old in Arkansas gets his cancer cured.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter because part of living in a society is taking care of other people. If we were only going to fend for ourselves, then we wouldn't have formed family groups as when we were Homo sapiens.
Yeah. Oh, well, there wouldn't have been an American Revolution. I mean, had John Adams not cared for his cousin Sam, you know, and by the way, and I've had people bring this up with me. Yes, Samuel Adams was a real person. He's not just a beer, guys.
Yes.
He's not just a beer. And I say this as the biggest John Adams fan in the world, and I know Sebastian can attest to that. In fact, just about everybody can after I saw Hamilton. So much so that I'm probably going to read more John Adams at Christmas time. That's a whole nother episode. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like we've boiled it down to just selfishness and, I mean, hell, when people were donating to the Minnesota Freedom Fund, yeah, I'm unemployed. Yeah, I'm stuck at home. Yeah, I'm scared of the bloody plague outside. But you know what? I'm still donating, and I did. I donated to the Minnesota Freedom Fund because it all goes back to that GIF that I commented on your post, Heather.
Yeah.
Which is George has spoken, to which George in the GIF says, and I know Sebastian and I have said this many times, especially in our Joker episode, we live in a society.
You didn't say it right, man.
Yeah.
You
I'm saying it like George.
It's all a part of the plan.
Oh, I'm saying it like George because I emulate George Costanza in more ways than you can imagine.
Well, yeah.
But yeah, no, I totally get you. I was like, I'm not of black descent, but that doesn't mean I shouldn't help them. That doesn't mean I shouldn't use the white privilege that I possess to then help them get their equality that they still don't have.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, oh my God, it's just so frustrating that people aren't willing to sacrifice a little if it helps. Because another argument is like, oh, well, I don't need a lot of my money. Well, wouldn't it be cool if we didn't need charities because the government took care of it?
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be great? If my 10% of my paycheck or whatever taxes you want to take out of my paycheck goes towards helping things, and then I don't have to feel like I have to tip the server at the restaurant because they're making a fair wage, and I shouldn't have to donate to the charity so that the little kid can have shoes because it's being taken care of with that 10% that's already being taken out of my paycheck. So it's not going to the paychecks of the big military people. And I'm not talking about the people that are like soldiers in the military. I'm talking about them big heads of the military who are sitting in Washington, D.C., doing nothing, collecting fat paychecks off of that fat defense budget.
We love the generals. We love them. So many generals. They're everywhere.
I think with that, and also because I'm noticing the time, I'd like to, these are all great points, and I'm really glad that I kind of stood back for this episode.
You always stand out, Sebastian.
Stood back to kind of take it all in. But I do have one, sort of general statement to sort of wrap it all up. Again, these are my words, and this is my opinion on the matter, and it's one part satire and 2 parts nihilism, because I really do feel that as long as people are like this, there is no change. And more to the point, there is no convincing. Okay. So, Karen, the archetype of what you would describe as such, more specifically the connotations associated with the term, which is about where all of one's seething hatred towards a person like this usually stems from. Look, for brevity, we all know someone like this, okay? Middle-aged, typically white, and almost always tone-deaf to everything politically surrounding her. Or him. Garen is a term that I've actually heard just now. I never knew I never knew a male equivalent could be like that. But, we're all about equality here on Mars on Life. For every Black Lives Matter statement yelled in the streets, there's almost always inexplicably a person like this, like a Karen, in combative response declaring that, well, all lives, in fact, matter, when in fact they tout the total opposite. I think I can speak generally for a moment that out of the two political parties of the 21st century, Democrats tend to err on the side of political correctness, right? The nonviolent response, of course, associated with most of these online internet arguments with Karens would theoretically be re-education, right?
Mm-hmm.
In an attempt to change their minds. And, noble endeavor, sure, but it's actually far less theoretical than you may think. And I'm not a registered Democrat, so here I go. It isn't theoretical at all. That would imply that an actual different result can emerge from talking with one of these delightful people, because I would go so far as to say that it's downright rhetorical. You cannot change a Karen's mind, or at least you can't change it directly,
Mm-hmm.
And it's to the point that we made before where I sort of made the statement of the moment that they agree that someone like you, Heather, or someone like you, Mancini, or me, or anyone encompassing the millennial Gen Z archetype, the day we're right is the day that they're dead. Because they obviously can't combat that, right? I won't, you won't, and more specifically, any random stranger on the internet won't, okay? The time it takes for someone like this, the wine drinking, Netflix binging, pill popping, the dogma that they spew, you could have spent a moment of a germ, of a molecule, of an atom of time to work on fixing yourself. Okay, there you go. That's my opinion. You don't like it? Go write the FCC. Okay, I don't give a shit. With that, where can the good people find you?
So you can find me on Instagram at Heather_cat with a K. So that's K-A-T. You can also find me on Twitter at Heather_KF. And I'm going to do a little shameless plug now. I recently started an Etsy shop where I make custom-made t-shirt quilts using people's memory t-shirts from like high school and college and things like that, and I donate 50% of the proceeds to Black Lives Matter funds. You can check out my Etsy shop at Crafting Change Co. on Etsy, and it goes more into detail about the process as well as what organizations specifically receive donations in exchange for those quilts. So yeah, go ahead and check me out on all the socials.
For all the people that want to know what I've been up to lately, I've basically been letting people know about what's in Mary Trump's tell-all about her twisted, evil, horrible, dictatorial family. You can find me at Mancini Ryan on Instagram. I'm sure by the time this episode goes up, all of those stories will be gone. But then again, as my good friend Sarah Dixon told me, I was doing God's work. I guess even though I'm an atheist, I might as well just say what the Blues Brothers once said, we're on a mission from God. When it comes to Twitter, though, you can find me at Mancini Ryan. I've been trying to be a little bit more active on there, but once again, it's Twitter. And then a notable thing, too, I think I mentioned this the last time we had Heather on the show, and I never got around to it, so I might as well say it now. I think I'm going to start doing more like I'm doing any now. I'm going to start live streaming on Instagram beginning August 1st, because I think that I'm trying to get off this weird bad high that I've been on with my reading, whether it's been informing myself on the AIDS epidemic or the Trump family. It's taken a great toll on me, and I'm trying to find new ways to enlighten myself, i.e. reading Gore Vidal's book about Aaron Burr, which I'm excited to reread in the coming weeks. As I said earlier, I hopped on the Jump Off with friend of the show, Janice, and we got to talk about Kanye 2020. And, oh boy, that was such a fun discussion. Oh, man. As was this one. So much fun. Sebastian, good sir, Squire, where can the good people find you?
All right, so you can find me on Twitter and Instagram under the handles of Dr. Sebi. That's DRSEBBY for Instagram, DR_SEBBY for Twitter. It's still just as bad as Mustafar. I feel like Anakin on Mustafar whenever I fucking log into Twitter. Literally, I feel like I never have the high ground, so to speak.
But Lord Sidious promised us peace. We only want...
But, God, I can't even fucking believe it. But, again, I've done this going on this many episodes. So, you can also follow me on YouTube as well under the handle of Seabass, like the fish. There I publish daily audio narrations, as well as on my audio archive, Shugsy Storytime, which is a podcast also available on Anchor. Going into more technical things, you can also submit a manuscript to me at Sebastian Shug Publishing, either via email and or phone. I have a bunch of new projects coming up, music related as well. And yeah, music. God, my mind's running at like a mile a minute here. You gotta forgive me. Shugsy, SCHUGZY. That is my music profile. New album coming out August 1st. I sound like every goddamn 17-year-old I ever went to high school with, but them's the breaks.
Kanye, is that you?
God. And as far, I may as well say this as a disclaimer. The comedic hyperbole that we both use, obviously it's intended as jokes. I could say that I conjured this up the night before. Oh, this is who I'm going to be. But we've been doing this since episode 1. So, yeah, I expect many more.
You got it, man. Alrighty. Well, that's the show. Once again, Heather, thank you so much for joining us. And I'm just kind of scrolling through a Twitter account right now. As one of our presidential candidates recently said, I'm a focus on music now. Take it easy.
Thank you for listening to Mars on Life. You can find us over on Instagram and on Twitter at Mars on Life Show. In terms of listening to the show, you can find us wherever podcasts are found. That includes Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Anchor, and Radio Public. Our artwork is done by Zachary Erberich, and our intro music is Space Explorers by Kevin MacLeod. I've been Ryan Mancini. My co-host as always is Sebastian Shug. And just remember, if you keep on going, you'll make it to Mars.